Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. Sorry B. I'm actually trying to record this video a few times. Hopefully this one will catch. This one will work. Okay, so we're here in North Carolina, just waiting to pick up a load. I called. They're like, that's not supposed to be ready till 21:30. I'm like, oh, that's great because my window closes at 21:29. But I told them I'd call them back. It's a little after noon. B and I are just hanging. So I wanted. I don't have any history lesson or any geology or anything right this second, but that's okay because I wanted to talk about something that a few people have reached out to me about, and it's a couple of different scenarios, and the title for this video, Guerrilla Tactics for Getting a Job in the Trucking Industry, kind of comes from this book that I bought years ago called Guerrilla Tactics for Landing the Job, Your Dream Job, or something like that. But the guerrilla tactics is the important part. And the idea was, how do you do things to get to decision makers, to get to, people that'll talk to you, that'll be able to say, yeah, let's hire this person. The same problem exists in the trucking industry, right? Like every industry has gatekeepers. So if it's somebody that's a one-person business, well, then the gatekeeper is the person that's the hiring person. You just go talk to the owner. He's like, hey, man, can I help you mow lawns or whatever it is they do? Can I help you build sheds? But the bigger a company is, the more layers there are. The more layers, the more you got to peel back the onion to get to where get to the person you want to talk to. So, at a company that has an office building and, they sit at desks and type on computers all day, you might have to talk to the director of HR or the director of the department that you would be working in. But you got to get past, the security guard. Like literally, you got to get in the parking garage. You got to get in the building, or you got to get past the receptionist, the executive assistant, the assistant vice president for gatekeeping, whoever it is, right? You got to get past them. And when I say past them, I don't mean like run past them, but or like climb over a desk or something like that, or break into a property. But you have to get contact with the person who's making the decision. Now, at trucking companies, we have gatekeepers, and they're called recruiters. Now, they're not the only gatekeepers, but they are gatekeepers. And it sounds weird to say that the recruiter would be an impediment to somebody getting a job at a trucking company, because we all think recruiters are there just to get everybody in the door. And it turns out that both things are true, right? Recruiters want to get as many people in a seat on a truck as they can, but recruiters are like any other people, right? They're going to pick the low-hanging fruit. If you fit into their little box easily, you're going to have no problem getting hired. But if you're a little outside their box, they may not want to spend the time to understand that you're a good candidate and push you along. Because it wouldn't surprise me to learn that at really big trucking companies, recruiters are partially graded on the quality of the people they bring in, but not just the quality, but also the difficulty of saying yes to the people they bring in. So, they can, maybe recruiters do advocate for candidates, but I think a lot of times recruiters are going to be like, you know what, I know that the next person up the line is going to say no, so I'm not even going to forward this application. It's not even going to be worth my while, and I don't want to have a rejected application. Because it wouldn't surprise me to learn that they have, that they're partially graded, whatever you want to say, on rejection rate. Okay, in other words, they're not forwarding the most qualified candidates or the easiest qualified candidates to get over the hump. So I know at Prime there's the recruiter, but then there's also people that do verifications. I don't know if those people work in the recruiting department or if they work in HR, or even if they work in the ultra secret verification department. But so that's the dilemma, right? And so what I want to talk about is a couple of scenarios that people have asked me about, and I've emailed with people, I've given people some ideas, but I want to throw some of this out. Now, let me preface all this by saying this. As you know, I used to practice law, so here comes the disclaimer. I'm not telling you to falsify information on employment applications. I'm not telling you to lie to recruiters or to the company or whatever. But let me also say this, okay? And because I've said it before. People, they want you to fit in that box. And if you fit in that box, they're probably not going to do a lot of drilling down. Now, they are going to call references a lot of times. They're going to find references, that you provide. So it's important that you make their job easy. So let's deal with the first scenario, which is maybe a little bit simpler. You have, and there are two scenarios I want to talk about. One is you have a CDL but no experience. And two is you are an otherwise good candidate, but your job experience, your work history, right, is sketchy. And when I say sketchy, I don't mean like you were in the mob, right? Or that you were a mule for some drug cartel. I mean sketchy to them, which is self-employment, right? And self-employment, it's kind of funny because politicians always talk about, small business owners like they're, like the backbone of the economy. And in many ways they are, right? In many ways, like if you look at numbers, they are. But America, like the rest of America, actually doesn't like self-employed people. Think about how mortgage companies treat self-employed people. Think about how employers, like W-2 employers, treat self-employed people that are trying to come in and work for them. Anybody that has to verify employment in any way hates self-employed people. So you got to overcome that, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so first scenario, you got a CDL and you have a non-sketchy employment history, but you have no experience. You paid for the school yourself, and I don't know if there's some quality like marks for these schools. I know some schools, they probably shouldn't exist, but they do. Some schools have cheated people out of their money. But anyway, the reason I think some trucking companies don't want the person with a CDL but no experience is because, and by the way, when I say CDL, it should be understood that I also mean a valid DOT medical card, because a CDL is just a driver's license for a car. If you don't have a valid medical card, you can't drive a semi. And probably that's true of a Class B and Class C CDL. And yes, there are Class Cs. Who has Class Cs are the people that drive like sprinters, like for FedEx Custom Critical. Because at Class C, you have a hazmat, you can get an endorsement. That's why you have to have a C. Anyway, for hazmat. But one of the things that trucking companies can't do is they can't leverage the fact that they trained you. So, like a lot of companies, they say, oh, once you're done with training, you owe us a year, or you owe us this, or you owe us money, right? And that tends to keep people around, right? It cuts down on the trucking company's turnover. The other thing that trucking companies know is that once you get a little bit of experience, then, you can, if they're a bottom feeder in terms of pay and benefits and quality of life, they know you're going to leave. So again, if they're locking you into a year or 18 months or 2 years after you get your CDL with them, then, you know, it makes their life easier, right? It's one less person they got to recruit. So that's something you need to overcome. But are there ways to get experience without, you know, getting rejected by big companies and stuff? And, you know, it depends on what you consider experience. Now, some of them are very specific. They say over the road experience. I don't know where it was. I saw somebody said that they drove regional, and some other company was like, well, that's not over the road. And I'm like, well, what the hell is it then? Like, what do they drive on, like, dirt trails out in the woods? I mean, regional, you could go hundreds of miles a day, just like an over the road guy doing regional. So I didn't even get that. It was like, it was so stupid. And I'm going to tell you right now, there are a lot of dumb people in recruiting offices at trucking companies. When I say the box, man, they don't even want to, if you're even close to the line, they don't want to figure anything out. And I'll tell you a quick story. I had an accident. I didn't have an accident. A guy hit me. A tow truck hit me, actually. Sideswiped me in traffic while I was driving to court. And it just so happened that a guy, you know, this guy just like, he didn't, it was almost like he hit me on, well, it was like he knew I was there. He was just like, I'm going to come over, and then this guy in the little Honda Civic is just going to figure it out. But I had nowhere to go, and he freaking just like ripped off my mirror, smashed up my car, and a guy behind was a witness. And you know, the thing was, right, like, you know, the police came just because the tow truck driver was such an asshole that I called the police to do a report because I didn't want to talk to him. But there's no accident report, right? Because when you know, like, it's just a fender bender kind of thing, the cops don't want to get involved because then they can get brought into court. Like, if a police officer does a report and I was doing personal injury work, I would subpoena him for testimony. I might even subpoena him to take a deposition. And he doesn't want to do that because it's not part of his job. But he's going to have to come there, and you know, he may not get paid, but I'm not going to pay him because I don't have to, right? I got a subpoena. And so they don't do reports. So, you know, I said, you know, when I filling out some applications to trucking companies, I was like, hey, you know, I was involved in an accident. Here's what happened. And they're like, well, we need a police report. I'm like, there isn't one. Oh, there must be. There must be. And I'm like, no, there isn't. And, you know, I'm a lawyer in this state, and I could tell you for a fact that police don't come to most accidents. I mean, and that's true everywhere. Like, you see the signs everywhere. If there's a fender bender, pull over to the side, you know, exchange information. Like, don't call the cops unless somebody's hurt. They're not going to, you know, they don't want to go. You know, they're like, everybody will figure it out on their own, you know, pull off on the shoulder. But at least two companies were like, oh, well, if you don't have a police report. And I'm like, there isn't one. So then I went to my insurance company, because my insurance company, you know, I settled the case for like $8,000. Well, you know, my insurance company issued me a letter, said, you know, yes, there was this accident, but he wasn't at fault and he got a settlement, blah, 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 right? It still wasn't good enough because I didn't fit into the box. Like, they just couldn't figure it out. They were just that dumb. So how do you get past that gatekeeper, right? Well, the answer is you give them what they hope to see. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, if you have a CDL-A and you drive a Sprinter van for some Amazon contractor or for some, you know, FedEx ground or something, you are a commercial driver with experience. Now, if they don't specifically ask the question, do you have experience driving a truck, a tractor trailer, you know, you don't have to volunteer that. But now, even if they do, right? Even if they do ask that and you just happen to check the box that says, yeah, I drove a 53-foot van, you know, they probably won't check. But if they do, you know, you just got to make sure that whoever you're given as a referral is like, yeah, this guy drove a truck for us. Oh, I don't know what it's called. You know, because they just want to check a box, okay? That's one way to, you know, just maybe have experience, right? Driving a school bus. I had a trainee that drove a school bus and a cement mixer. It's experience, right? Now, she ended up getting her CDL going through the whole training, you know, but my point is that, you know, I've told this story before about a guy I met at Trans Am that drove for like a garbage hauling company, and he was like, yeah, I got experience. He had a CDL-B, and they fired him for getting in an accident. He was like, yeah, I got experience. They didn't bother to check, okay? So there are companies out there, you know, Trans Am, PAM, you know, Rail says they hire without experience. You know, you look on the internet, and the other thing too is you got to cast a wide net, right? Like, there might be a company, you know, there when I first came into trucking, there were a couple of companies that I really was like, yeah, I'd really like to work for them, and I didn't get hired. And I'm grateful that I didn't get hired. I look back on my career, and I'm like, man, I am so glad I didn't go to one of those companies, because my requirements were I was looking for a company that would pay you while you were in training and train you. And hold on a second. So, you know, but I'm so grateful I didn't go to either of those companies. I'm happy how things turned out. So, anyway, that, you know, maybe those are some ideas about that experience piece, right? Because driving is driving, right? Like, if you're driving a little, you know, van, you know, one of those, I don't even know what you call them, you know, the package delivery vans like UPS has or whatever. You're a professional driver, right? You have safety requirements. I'm almost certain you have a pre-trip requirement. You're doing all those things. The only thing is you're not backing a semi up to a loading dock, you know? The other experience that doesn't require, the other job that doesn't require a CDL, but is certainly driving tractor trailers, is being a jockey. You know, there are lots of companies that are looking for jockeys that have CDLAs. I don't think they're great jobs because I really don't feel like they pay people enough. But jockeying, you know, and transferring trailers, like I was a jockey and didn't leave the complex, right? So I didn't have a CDL when I jockeyed. But other jockeys will take trailers from one facility to another. And they're looking for CDLA guys. But jockeying, you know, it, like I said, it doesn't pay a ton of money. Like the jobs I've seen, and this is why I think they're underpaid, is they pay like $22 an hour. I'm like, $22 an hour, but you want them to have a CDL, you should be paying them more. Because I made $20 an hour with zero experience and no CDL. And that was back in like 2019, early 2019. So anyway, so that might be a way to meet that experience piece. So the second thing is the sketchy employment. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story about a guy I know. He had a business and he put his own phone number, and then he said when somebody like was trying to verify employment for that self-employment, they called his number, right? Like, I don't know whether they didn't notice it was the same number, or I don't know what number he put on the application, but for whatever reason they called his mobile, and he answers it, and they're like, yeah, I'm trying to verify employment for this guy. And he's like, oh, Well, yeah, he used to work here, but you know the person you really need to talk to is this other person, and he gave him his wife's name and his wife's phone number. He's like, yeah, if you just call so and so, this is her direct dial. If you just call so and so, she'll verify employment. So what happens? He texts his wife, and they call his wife, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm the personnel manager or whatever she said, and they're like, oh okay. Why did that work? It's in the box. It's in the box. You know how, what do you think would happen? And I'm just throwing this out there. What do you think would happen? You know, I was talking about, what was the company? Midwest. I can't even remember. Oh wait, maybe I have notes on it. Yeah, Mid-Continent. I keep notes. Mid-Continent Trucking out of Denison, Iowa. They are in bankruptcy. What do you think would happen if in about 3 weeks you listed them as an employer and said, yeah, I work for this company, but I lost my job because they went bankrupt. And here's a number that they used to have, but I don't think anybody's there anymore. What do you think they're going to do to verify employment? Well, they can't call the company because the company doesn't exist. They may say, well, is there somebody there? Do you know somebody that used to work there that could verify that you were there? Yeah. Done, right? Of course you know somebody that could verify your employment at any company. I needed to verify employment and by the way, this was a legit job I had, but I had been laid off and I just didn't want to deal with anybody because I didn't think the office manager was actually return a phone call, because that's the other thing. People got to answer these calls, right? So you know what I did? I reached out to a friend of mine who still worked there, but she and I were close and we had a good relationship. I said, hey, will you do me a favor? I said, there are going to be some employers calling to verify my employment. Will you just do that for me? And she was like, yeah, sure. And since she was on the phone all the time, I mean, she had great phone presence, right? You know, she would call people and try to get cases settled, and she would deal with different things. She was perfect, you know? And so I just gave them her mobile number, and she would take the call and she'd be like, oh, Terry? Yeah. You know, and then she would do the, all right, hold on, let me check. Let me get on my computer here. Do a few fake clicking in the background. Oh yeah, that's when he worked here. Done. Right? It's in the box. So I'm not telling you to I'm not telling you to totally make up a story. By the way, if you want to hear of a great made-up story, look up a guy named Clark Rockefeller. Clark Rockefeller. There was, I actually met the guy in person. Turned out he was a murderer. And I met him in Baltimore at a social event, at a realtor's office. We're just sitting there having cocktails and, cheese cubes, and meet this guy. But yeah, look it up. There was a Lifetime movie made about this guy. That's how compelling his story was. And I was face to face with him, just shooting the bull. Clark Rockefeller, look it up. But I'm not saying make up a whole life story, right? And because sometimes stuff comes back to haunt you. You don't want to be the guy that gets fired for falsifying information. But like I said, there are ways to just get yourself in the box that are guerrilla tactics, if you will, right? You can't get somebody at your company, like I'm sure if you worked at one of these giant warehouses, getting your shift supervisor return, like you worked overnight shift, getting them to return a phone call to a potential new employer who you might not want contact, right? You might still want to keep your job, right? They don't, because I remember one time I was at a trucking company and somebody called to verify employment while I was still there. And next thing you know, man, oh, they were like, oh, we got to treat this guy. But it was kind of funny because I was leaving because they were unprofessional, and then they started being all professional. And, you know, and the funny thing was the company that called to verify employment is not where I went to when I left. But that's another story. But so I just, you know, somebody actually helped me. But, you know, make it easy for the gatekeeper to just forward your application, right? Just push it up the line. Create a good candidacy, and just be able to fill it in. If you ever saw the movie Argo with Ben Affleck and John Goodman was in it, Alan Arkin. If you remember the scene where Alan Arkin and John Goodman are just about to pack it in and leave their office, and the phone rings. And by the way, this is based on a true story. The phone rings, and they verify that these people trying to escape from Iran are actually a film crew, right? It was all a sham to get some Americans out of Iran. That was run by the CIA. But that's what we're talking about here. Like the guy I know that had his wife verify employment, all she was doing was telling the truth. She just was, you know, she wasn't who they thought she was, but she was still telling the truth. So, you know, I just encourage you to think outside the box to get in the box, and, you know, kind of be a guerrilla, right? Don't take no for an answer. If one company rejects you, find another company. Just keep throwing stuff out there until somebody says yes. And then you do your job, you do it safely, you stay out of trouble, and then, you know, a few months down the road, and it doesn't take very long, everybody else will be like, yeah, this is a good candidate. Let's bring this guy in. So anyway, good luck. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.